Welcome to the Brew Crew Review Podcast, the show by fans for fans of your Milwaukee Brewers. Well, that was an exciting trade deadline, wasn't it, Brewer fan? Welcome to Brew Crew Review Podcast number 34. As the 2018 non-waiver trading deadline has come and gone, and the Brewers made a bold move. It was on their third attempt to make a trade, and it wasn't for necessarily who they wanted, but that's okay. We still get to talk about it. With me tonight is Scott and Vince.
Hey, Vinny.
And
Hey, Craig.
How's it going?
Good. How are you?
Good. And I was wondering if Chad was going to join us for this special occasion. Scott, didn't you say he was going to maybe call in this time, or?
No, not. Apparently, he's come down with hand, foot, and mouth disease. So I don't know.
Oh,
wow.
Yeah, you don't want to be using the phone. Yeah, you don't want to be doing that.
Highly contagious, too. We don't want West Dallas to get sick. So glad Chad's resting at home, and hopefully he gets better very soon.
Yeah, probably only a 10-day DL. He might miss the next podcast, too, actually.
Yeah.
So
hopefully he wasn't hanging out with Noah Syndergaard trying to talk him into accepting a trade to the Brewers or something. I don't know.
I'm sure Chad will be back for podcast number 35.
I think
to be expected.
I think Hap also has hand, foot, and mouth disease now, too, I think.
Huh.
Wonderful. All right, so do you guys want to recap? You want me to quick go over?
Why don't you recap here, Craig? Give us the lowdown, and then Scott can give his analysis.
All right. Well, going into the trade deadline, of course, you would listen to our last podcast where we talked about the acquisition of Joaquin Soria, Mike Moustakas, Moose, of course, as we slid Travis Shaw over to second base, and that's been working out well for a couple days. And the Stearns was on the lookout for a starting pitcher here as the trade deadline came to its last day, as we all thought. And it was rumored that we were in the running, one of the final teams in the running for Chris Archer, who ultimately ended up with the Pirates, for right-handed pitcher Tyler Glasnow, Austin Meadows, outfielder, and a player to be named later. The Brewers did not land Archer, unfortunately. We were also rumored to be in the running for Kevin Gausman from the Orioles, and he ultimately went to the Braves for pretty mediocre prospects. So apparently our offer was not good enough to land him either. However, we did have a glaring weakness at second base, where we only had about 7 players on the roster who could play second. So we decided to trade for the Orioles second baseman Jonathan Schoop. And the details of that trade, going from the Brewers to the Orioles, the headliner of the trade is most likely right-handed pitcher Luis Ortiz, our number 7th overall prospect, according to MLB.com. Also, our number 14th overall prospect, 18-year-old shortstop Gene Carmona. And also, Major League second base / shortstop Jonathan Villar. So that was the return for Mr. Jonathan Schoop. He did have in his second year of arbitration eligibility, he's making over $9 million this year. The Brewers will take on a portion of that that's left. And then also next year, he'll be in his last year of arbitration eligibility. And that would be, so most likely make between $10 and $12 million. So anyway, he has control for a year and a half. What are your guys' thoughts on Stern's big trade?
Who do you want to go first, Craig?
Scott. He seems to be a good one to go first. That way we'll know how much time we have left for our answers.
All right, you just want me to talk about all three, or just, I guess, a little bit? Break them down separate?
On what? To talk about
we went over this in we went over this in pre-production. You're just talking about Schoop.
That's it?
Yeah.
All right.
Well, if you'd like to talk about the players that other teams acquired, we could do that as well.
Sure.
Like I know you really like Wilson Ramos, who, if you want to mention, went to the Phillies.
Yeah, that was good.
But not to the Brewers. But anyway.
Well, at least the Phillies, I'm sure, gave up a lot to get him, right?
Not really, no.
Nope. Oh, all right.
Sure.
So, I don't know. This is a weird trade. I look at what we gave up, and it's just an awful lot for a guy that doesn't really get on base at a very good clip. I mean, he's been tearing it up, especially for the last month. He had a good year last year, but I don't know. This is just going to be a manager's nightmare when you're trying to get all these bats on the field at the right time. I don't know. I mean, we have a glut of infielders now, and we already had a glut of outfielders. So I don't know. It's just going to be interesting to see how we're going to do that. I just think it makes it easier if our starters are only going 5 innings, which apparently is the thing that we do now. They're only going 5 innings, then we're going to be able to switch out, doing a lot of double switches and moving people around, a lot of interchangeable parts, and I guess it's going to help with that. Having said that, with Soria added to the bullpen now, our bullpen is so good. I think that the bullpen kind of makes this like a really good, real good chance of having a solid playoff team, provided we actually make the playoffs.
Yeah, I am a little bit more bullish on Schoop than what you just said, Scott. I think that he is a really good ball player. I like the fact that he's been hot recently, and the last month has been really good. I think that it's kind of hard to look at this trade and try to get in Stearns' head with this. But if I had to, I'd say that he was trying to get this team to have options, and I know that that's been a big thing for both Stearns and Counsell in their tenure here. And I think that having a guy like Schoop on the team gives Craig Counsell more options, and I like the addition, and I think that overall it's a good one. So I'm not too concerned about what we gave up. I think that Ortiz has kind of leveled out a little bit. It seems like his last couple of seasons have not been very promising. So you're giving him up, and the biggest thing for me, and we all have talked about the need for acquiring a second baseman, I think, in previous podcasts, and I know that all of us were interested in Brian Dozier to some degree, or Jed Lowry earlier in the year when we didn't know if the A's were going to be in it or not. But I look at Schoop and I see a guy who the Brewers have control of next season, and I think that that's why Stearns was excited to pull the trigger on him. So I think that that's why he was going to do a trade today. It does give us a second baseman for next year, and it also is a great guy to have bridge the time until Castanero is going to be ready to play in the big league. So I'm in favor of the trade. I don't think we give up too much for him. Jonathan Villar has obviously been on the disabled list this year. He wasn't awful, but not great. He's in the 260s and had an awful year last year. So I'm not too worried about losing Villar. We lost a ton of playing time anyway. So overall, I think it increases our versatility, and we didn't lose too much. And I'll say that we still have our top 4 prospects in the system for us going forward for either more trades when other starting pitching is on the market that maybe Stearns likes better, or these guys actually play for the Brewers.
Yeah. I'll first talk about the players we did give up. Luis Ortiz, he's someone who, again, there's a lot of pitchers ahead of him in the organizational depth charts. Obviously, Peralta emerging this year. You've got Burns and Woodruff most likely ticketed for the hopefully rotation next year, or at least competing for the spots in rotation. So Ortiz is probably going to be all of next year at AAA, as this is his second year in AA. There's some thought that he has some conditioning issues due to his body type, and he also has yet to log over 100 innings in any one season because of health issues in the minor leagues. So again, he is someone that we did get, if you don't remember, in the Lucroy trade with Texas, along with Brinson, and we've already done some Brinson. Now we're flipping Ortiz. So obviously, I think he was the main piece to give up because he is closest to the major. Gene Carmona, someone who I can call him like a Orlando Arcia light. He's only 18 years old, really good defensively, long ways away from the major leagues. Anything could happen, but you could have a nice player on your hands there. And then, of course, Jonathan VR, I think he was expendable, and he didn't necessarily fit on the roster going forward, so obviously it made a lot of sense to put in the deal. It does make a lot of sense, I think, for a team like the Orioles to acquire so they can plug him right into the roster and scope spot. And, he does definitely hold some value. It's not like he was just a toss-in, even though that's what it feels like. So it was a pretty solid return for the Orioles if I'm an Orioles fan. Now, a player in Jonathan Schoop that we're getting, he is a pretty, like Winston pointed out, he had over 30 home runs last year. He has a little problem with his on-base percentage. It's not that high typically, but he is a good defender at second base, and he is only 26, so he's just entering his baseball prime. I think there could be some more in store if we can, especially moving over to Miller Park, more hitter-friendly home field. Hopefully we have a really good player in Schoop. My number one concern is Brewer fans learning to pronounce his last name correctly. But overall, the other concern,
I was definitely guilty. I was definitely guilty of that, Craig. I was pronouncing it Schoop until today. So,
which is a great Salt and Pepper song, and most other people I think were too. Either that or I pronounce Scoop too, like Scoop ice cream or something. But yeah, but no, I mean, overall he's definitely a solid player, and like Vince pointed out, he is controlled, not just a rental, but like Dozier would have been, but he is controlled through next year. So with that being said, the price, I think the Brewers had a pretty high price for him, and again, I would have preferred with Hero possibly being ready next year. I would have preferred going after someone who was paid very little for via trade. The Dodgers acquired Brian Dozier, a rental with a similar profile, offensive profile, scope, or even someone like Ian Kinsler, who the Red Sox added for virtually nothing from the Angels. Those type of players, if indeed we did need a second baseman, which we didn't, by the way, the would have made more sense, in my opinion, without having to give up more of the prospects that, this quality of prospects. However, with that being said, you have to give Stearns credit for he did not trade any of the three, what I call the current Brewer blue chip prospects, which are Freddie Peralta, already at the major league level, Corbin Burns, same thing, and Keston Hiura, who no one seems to want to give up. So kudos to that. And also three future blue chippers, I call them. And of course, there could be more of them in our system. But obviously, Corey Ray has turned it around this year, and I think he's going to be a blue chipper going forward, starting next year. And then the same thing with a player like Tristan Lutz and Zach Brown has had a breakout year as a pitcher in the minor leagues too. And so we held on to players like that. So you have to give Stearns credit for improving our overall team, while also not giving up those blue chip prospects. So I think overall, Brewer fans, no matter where you're coming at, are somewhat happy in that. And he did improve the offense. If you look at the numbers, that was more of a problem than either our starting pitching or, of course, our bullpen first half of the season. So if you look at it just from that in a nutshell, that should improve our team. With all that being said, what are your guys' takes on how are we going to fit the bats? It was so fun going through the off season with our outfield log jam. So why not have a mid-season infield log jam? Lots of fun. Sorry, Craig. Didn't mean to interrupt. I just was going to say really quick too. On this trade, I don't know that we've really touched on in this podcast. I know we did last week about guys that we weren't going to be able to protect anyways from the Rule 5 draft, and we'd have had to, I think, add Ortiz to our 40-man roster, correct? If we were going to try to protect him. So I don't know that Stearns and the Brewers brass were willing to do that. And so when you look at it from that perspective, it almost feels like we gave up a lottery ticket, a guy like DR who is definitely expendable, and a guy who we weren't probably going to be able to keep anyways, that we would lose on the Rule 5 draft, for a guy who can play second base for us for a couple seasons. And I really like what you said about the top, say 6 prospects in our system that we now have to either keep or use for starting pitching going forward if somebody becomes available that is a true top of the rotation type. And I think that maybe Stearns is saving some of those guys for a bigger trade in the offseason for
a true top of the rotation starter. Maybe the Mets put DeGrom on the market then. Maybe
or
I'm
next
glad
year at this time. Yeah.
Or next year at this time. I'm glad I like Chris Archer a lot from the Rays, and I did want the Brewers to see, about getting him, but I looking at what the Pirates gave up today for him. I don't know that if I'm the Brewers, I would have done that trade. I think that Archer's a good pitcher. I think that he's probably a 2 to 3, not a top of the rotation guy necessarily for the Brewers. And I think I'd be really more upset about giving up any of the 6 guys that you mentioned for anyone but a top of the rotation starter, rather than a guy like Ortiz. Well, again, I don't think we were going to be able to protect in the Rule 5 for a guy who's definitely got some upside in Jonathan Schoop.
I see your point about the 40-man, Vince. However, as a top 10 prospect, I think Luis Ortiz would have been for sure protected. It would have been one of those fringe guys that are on a 40 that probably would have not been protected. But I get what you're saying. There was going to be an overall 40-man crunch, and we already jettisoned Phillips from that, and VR obviously going off the team too. But yeah, so I guess the next question, and obviously up for much discussion most likely, is the fact: where do you guys see? Maybe Vince can start on this one. Just gotta try to make sure to stay awake at least. But you're coming up next.
Okay.
What is your guys? what is? I'm sorry for talking so much, but what is your guys' thoughts on how are we going to fit Jonathan Schoop into the everyday lineup to get enough at bats for not only him, but of course for Travis Shaw, one of our best players, and also Mike Moustakas. So.
It's a great question. I think that Schoop becomes our everyday second baseman at this point. I don't think we would have acquired him if he wasn't. I think Moustakas is our everyday third baseman, and of course that leaves Shaw. So if I'm Craig Counsell, I'm working Shaw into the lineup virtually every day, but I'm going to figure out creative ways to do it. So if he can, truly play second base, and we really don't know that yet, but if he can truly play second base, then I think he'll definitely get at bats there. He can definitely still get at bats at third. So maybe he just kind of stalls these guys. He's a great left-handed hitter off the bench, I guess. But you'd hate to bench a guy like Travis Shaw too. So it's going to be, it's a great question. And how creative Craig Counsell can be, I guess we'll determine here in the next 2 months. But Orlando Arcia, who is obviously a great defender at shortstop, could also see his role reduced a little bit. And Schoop getting some games in a shortstop. I know he's only played 7 games there in the big leagues, but he did play a little bit more there, I believe, in the minor leagues and previously. So I could see him getting some reps at shortstop. So I'm confident that Craig Counsell is going to be able to get enough at bats for all these guys. And it's really only a problem for the next 2 months while we still have Moustakas on the team.
Yeah, I think.
Scott, how do you think?
Yeah, just Vince did a great job breaking it down. Yeah, Schoop has actually quite a bit of shortstop experience in the minors. I think that has to be – I think he's definitely taking he's definitely going to play a good amount of shortstop as well. I think otherwise we wouldn't have done this trade at all just because our lineup, if Schoop doesn't play shortstop, then the bottom third of our lineup is still Arcia, Pena or Kratz, and the pitcher spot, which is terrible. And our lineup was only 6 deep before we got Schoop. So I think we're going to get a little bit creative. I think there's going to, essentially a very good player is not going to be in our starting lineup on any given day. Simple as that. But I think that we wouldn't have done this deal for Schoop if we didn't think he could play short, because we're going to need a bat at shortstop at some point.
Yeah, and I agree with that, Scott. I also think that, remember when Doug Melvin acquired CC Sabathia and his quote was, "We're going for it." I think that today what David Stern said is, we're going for it now and next year too, because I think Schoop was also keeping 2019 in mind. Again, by having him there or on our team next year, we were able to put him in as our starting second baseman, pretty much on day one, and chalk and slot back to third base, provided that we don't re-sign Moustakas. So I see this as an issue that can be creatively solved over the course of 2 months. And worst case scenario, we've got a great bat on our bench in one of these guys. And as we all know from watching a lot of baseball and playoff baseball, that if we are fortunate enough to be able to make the postseason, you can't have too many good bats on your bench coming off of for coming into the game later on, or even starting, and then you plug in Arcia later in the game for defensive purposes. There's a lot of creative ways to manage this. But again, I think it's really only a problem for 2 months since Moustakis is a free agent, and we're probably unlikely to re-sign him.
Yeah, it's interesting you guys point out this. I think the time of the trade and most of the trade chatter online and, of course, MLB Network and whatnot, I don't think anyone even speculated that Schoop could and would play shortstop at the major league level. So it's interesting that you think that there could be a plan. I've actually gotten our colleague Tom Hardekart actually asked Stearns about that possibility since the trade happened, and supposedly Stearns said that is a possibility. And just for our fans to know out there, that Schoop has played 7 games at the major league level at shortstop ready and played over 200 games in the minor leagues at shortstop. However, his defense was not very good there. So that's going to be a huge issue. I mean, it's a trade-off. If you are going to attempt this, just like attempting Shaw at second base, I think it's even more risky, or as risky at least, to try to get Schoop to play shortstop just to get his bat in the lineup over Arcia. So it's kind of like, how do you want to play this? But at least gives the council some options. Supposedly, council has asked if Schoop is playing shortstop, and he has said no since the trade happened. So I guess perhaps the GM and manager have to get on the same page. But
cool.
I will say that this trade was definitely a surprise today. I know that I think we even mentioned on the podcast last week that the Brewers had talked to Baltimore about Schoop, but I think that most people assume that those talks had kind of died off after the Brewers acquired Moustakis, 4 or 5 days ago now. So I think that it was a bit of a surprise today to see this. And I did want to raise one question, not to steal the show here, Craig, but I wanted to ask you guys if you could give David Stearns an overall deadline grade, what would it be? And I want to include the acquisitions, of course, of Mike Moustakis and Joakim Soria and Schoop into that discussion as well. Do you guys have a letter grade that you give to Stearns for this last week of activity?
Scott, go first.
All right. I'm gonna be very generous here, and I'm gonna give him a B.
We could really use Shannon on this one since he teaches America's Youth. He knows about the letter rating system quite well.
Yeah, he's busy preparing for America's Youth.
I'm gonna give him a B because he kept all of our blue chippers, as Craig already mentioned. He improved our team. He wasn't conservative like he was last year. He made 3 trades this year. I like that. And each trade individually is a pretty good trade that improved the team. The only reason why I'm even giving it a B and why I'm docking it is because it's more what he didn't do. Right now, we have a rotation of Anderson, Chassin, Guerra, Miley, and Peralta. And it's nothing to sneeze at. But if one of those guys goes down, if Davies has another setback, if Jimmy Nelson can't come back, which both of those things I think is very likely to happen. I don't think Nelson's coming back. But who's going to step up and be our 5th starter? Like, I'm trying to comb through AAA and look around. I'm like,
and don't forget Suter's hurt for the year too.
Yeah.
Don't forget Suter's done for the year too.
Yeah. So we don't have any depth at pitcher. And so, like, obviously everyone wants him to go out and get an ace, but I think he really should have gotten something. I don't know. Who is the guy? I think Hiram Burgos is the guy who's going to get called up if we desperately
I think it's Aaron Wilkerson, but or Brandon Woodruff. Brandon Woodruff.
I love Hiram Burgos. It's awesome.
I think we've already seen Aaron Wilkerson up this year as a starter, and we've seen Brandon Woodruff up as a starter too. So I think it's one of those 2 guys. But your point's definitely well taken, Scott. That's completely right on. In fact, you stole my thunder on a lot of those points. So I also give Stearns a B myself. I think that Stearns' overall approach was good. I've got no problems at all with any of the trades that we actually made. I love the fact that he added 2 bats, and I would say 2 high-quality bats in Moustakis and Schoop. And I like the fact that he got a former All-Star for our bullpen who has closed games and will fill in admirably, I think, out there in Soria. But two things. We still don't have a starting pitcher, like you said. And the thing I was most disappointed about today on the 31st, as we tape this, wasn't the starting pitchers that we lost out on so much, because I think the price is really high for Archer and, Gaussman. I think the Braves did give up five prospects for him. But I really looked at catcher today, and I don't understand what was going on with the Wilson Ramos situation. It looked like Tampa got virtually nothing for Ramos. And if I'm Stearns, I would definitely have taken a flyer, some lottery ticket prospect for a guy like Wilson Ramos, who was an All-Star this year, who Grant is on the disabled list, so he should be off by next week. I think he could have really helped our catching core going forward over the next couple of months. So I was most disappointed probably in that today. One other quick thought, I think that we're not quite done yet. Last year we picked up Neil Walker after the deadline. I think that we're probably still in the market for whatever starting pitching is maybe still available in August, and I don't know who that's going to be. If it's a Matt Harvey type, I don't know who else could be out there. But I could see the Brewers getting somebody, between now and August 31st, the next deadline. So those are my quick thoughts. But overall, it'd be just because the trades it did make, and like you said, he didn't give up any of our, I would say, 6 or 7 top prospects.
So are you saying that even though the trade deadline is passed, the Brewers are not done because we're going to grab somebody next month?
Yeah, I'm saying that that's a possibility at least. I think that there'll be guys that, pass through waivers, or guys that come to the Brewers perhaps. I don't know. It's hard to speculate on who that might be at this point, but there could be somebody out there that could happen. I just don't know how we get through the rest of this season without adding one more starting pitcher just for depth purposes alone. So I'm not holding out hope for a top of the rotation guy. I'm just saying somebody that can step in for some more depth just to provide another live arm, because like you said, one more injury and we're left with Aaron Wilkerson in our starting rotation. And I don't think that's
a recipe for success.
Right. It's trouble.
I'm sorry if you're related to Aaron Wilkerson and you're listening to our podcast, but
right. No, exactly. I know that Ben Hendrickson's dad's a big fan, but I do think that the Brewers are going to be actively looking at, potential waivers that could pass, or potential pitchers that can pass through waivers in August.
Definitely.
Yeah. So you guys make some good points. You didn't allow me to give Stearns a grade. I'm sure you guys are fearful what I'm going to give him. But anyway,
no, we want to hear it, Greg. We're just taking turns.
Oh no, I know. I do agree with Vince saying that the number one takeaway is that Stearns did improve the ball club, and that he did not give up any of our real top prospects that are that we didn't want to give up, basically, as Brewer fans and as GM of the Milwaukee Brewers. So I think Luis Ortiz is probably the best prospect we gave up over the course of the whole 3 trades we made, and I think we can live with that. Granted, he got 3 pretty good major leaguers with a nice track record. With that being, and also I'll give him credit for not trading Tim Dillard as well. Thank you for that. With that being said, I'll probably give him an incomplete, because what Vince said, I think that he didn't realize that today was the actual trade deadline, and if he would have, he possibly would have traded for a starting pitcher, because everyone and their brother knew that that's what we needed to do. So I'll give him, he's new at this whole GM thing, so I'll give him some credit. Like Vince said, there is still the August trade deadline where teams can put players on waivers if they pass through. We can still trade for them. Happened with Justin Verlander this year, so I assume Jacob deGrom should be able to make it through waivers, and the Brewers can. Oh wait, okay, that's not going to happen. So we could possibly get, maybe if the Orioles cut Alex Cobb and we're willing to take on the rest of his contract, like Brewer fans wanted us to before the season, we should be able to pick him up for a song. I'm guessing that should fix that. But no, Vince's point is valid that there could be someone that hits the waiver wire that, like we acquired even Neil Walker, I think, last year in August. So, I mean, there could be something, and I just hope, just with the depth that we have right now, it is quite scary if anything were to happen to any of our pitchers at this point. And just putting on some hope that, at least, well, with that being said, the two guys that we haven't mentioned, and you and Scott rattled off, all those guys are eligible for a rotation and to help out in the back end when, Nelson coming back, huge question mark. Davies coming back, that's less of a question mark. But even guys like Woodruff or Burns transitioning back from the bullpen to starting role could at least be a fallback desperation option if our depth really has to be tapped into, so to speak, going forward. So I don't know. It should be interesting.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a very interesting couple months here, and I'm hopeful that Davies can come back. I'm a little skeptical because he's had, I think, 2 or 3 setbacks at this point. So that was one of the bigger reasons why I was surprised that we didn't at least get somebody to fill in at the back end of the rotation, if nothing else. Today, I get not spending a ton of prospects on Archer. I think, again, what Pittsburgh paid was very high. I just think that any other depth would have been good at this juncture just because of the injuries, and I just don't have confidence that Davies is going to be able to come back to the Zach Davies from last year, for instance, in September or in August this season.
And as it's still, I don't know if the Brewers are still rebuilding or not, but I'm pretending that we are in kind of our last year of our rebuild. And with that being said, acquiring someone like Chris Archer would make sense, I think, more next season at the trade deadline, and therefore someone like DeGrom, hopefully the Mets suck again next year, someone like DeGrom or Syndergaard could be trade bait next year at this time, or even this other guys we were targeting like Stroman who weren't traded could obviously come about at that point next year. So maybe Archer just wasn't the guy, as it's pretty well pointed out, that he has probably already peaked in his career and is going to start some downward trending. And so it's not a guy you want to pay full price for necessarily, even given his track record, and that he could turn those things around. Instead, I would have rather paid a cheaper price for someone with a higher ceiling but has not had major league success, like Kevin Gausman. And Chad said, our friend Chad, even though I wasn't able to make the podcast, he does say that he always bets on Gausman. He's a big fan of Kevin Gausman. He's really disappointed we did not get him acquired, especially with such a small price paid by the Atlanta Braves. But with that being said, I really was disappointed as well as Chad, and I agree with Chad that getting Gausman would have been a really good idea because he, I think, will be trending upward, especially from the move from the AL East over the NL, and that he's gone through his growing pains at the major league level. And I think with the right toolage and he could really shoot up in the next 2.5 years. He's controlled by the Braves. And they literally gave up, I think, like their number 14 prospect, their number 30 prospect, and 2 guys not even ranked for Gausman. And so I would have preferred a trade like that. Why Stearns did not do that, I don't understand. We will never probably know the details of that. But obviously there were some players that the Orioles liked that we had because we ended up making a trade. And to me, I just don't.
Sure.
I don't think I've commented. I think that Schoop will have to get some starts at short just to get Shaw's bat in the lineup, because I just don't think this is very fair for Travis Shaw. I mean, what does the guy have to do to get every day at bats? He's borderline all-star last year, borderline all-star this year, the mayor of a whole city called Ding Dong, I guess, and he still doesn't have a freaking starting spot that he can count on. I mean, he's a team player, willing to play second, does that fine for like 3 days to show that he can do it, and then bam, job taken away again. I don't get it.
I mean, I think that Shaw is smart enough to understand the value of adding another good bat to the team, and I think that, he also gets the fact that Moustakas is likely gone after the season as a free agent. So if he takes a long view on this, you'll see that he'll probably still get plenty of at-bats and have a starting third base job back next year, and in the meantime be shooting for a pennant this season. So if I'm Shaw, I'm not as worried about it maybe as what you just said. But a total speculation here, but if I'm trying to guess as to why we didn't include Gausman in the Schoop trade, I would think that the Orioles, to package them together, wanted more than what the Braves gave up for just Gausman. And maybe Stearns just really had his mind set up on Schoop. I mean, we've been connected to him in rumors for over a week now. That's all I can think of as to what played out there. You know, you'd think that you could have put together a package deal with Baltimore. We need pitching. They traded Gaussman within an hour of trading Schoop to us. My guess is that they just wanted a couple higher level prospects that the Brewers were unwilling to part with for both of them in the same trade. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. I think that speculation is exactly right, Vance. We might not ever know, but it makes sense that maybe he was asking for both of them, and in doing so, the Orioles were trying to extract those guys they did get for Schoop. Plus, I'm going to guess that they also wanted, in order to get that two-player trade done, they wanted to get one of our blue chippers that Stearns was unwilling to give up.
Yep,
exactly. And in doing so, I think the Orioles smartly backed off and like, hey, other people are calling us about just Gaussman, and they're offering this that we're also interested in. So I think we're better off trading both those players separately. It's in our best interest as basically a team that's going to be in a huge rebuilding mode very soon, as they're having one of the most horrific seasons in Major League Baseball history up to this point. Oh.
I was just gonna, no, that was a good point. I think I can't take full credit for knowing what went down in the Orioles Brewers deliberations. I did get the inside scoop from our anonymous source who works with the Brewers, Tom Carter.
Tom Carter did. Oh.
Yeah, our anonymous source, Tom Carter. He told me that the Brewers wanted both Gaussman and Schoop, and the Orioles were just asking for a little bit too much, so they decided to deal them separately. But yeah, that came from our anonymous source, Tom Carter.
Yeah, he told me like
TC.
Stearns had a lot of balls in the air and was like working the phones for sure, but he also said like keep it on the hush hush and don't mention his name and that kind of stuff. But I forgot.
Which one?
Tom Carter told me not to.
Oh.
We were supposed to say that our inside source, TC, and only say TC, is not employed by the Brewers front office.
Oh, right.
But he does have the inside. I know we're not supposed to say anything like that.
Okay, so let's just call him Tom C. or T. Carter, and he works for the Brewers. How about that?
Sounds fair. I think.
Yeah, that way we don't.
I don't see anything wrong with that.
Yeah, that way we don't say Tom Carter's name on the air anymore. Makes sense.
Yeah, that works.
Okay. Hey guys, I just got a note handed to me by our intern Letitia, and she tells me that Brad Miller has been officially released. He was designated for assignment several days ago when the Brewers acquired Mike Moustakas, and his fate has indeed been determined. So Brad Miller, thanks for playing. He is no longer in our system.
That works out.
I am disappointed that G-Man Choi, unfortunately, was only worth 80 terrible at-bats and of Brad Miller. I would have hoped he would have had more value than that, but sometimes...
Well, I mean, couldn't we have tried playing G-Man Choi at, like, some, I don't know, position that's not his or something? Like maybe short or catcher?
Catcher, yeah.
He definitely looks like a shortstop.
Would start thinking outside the box a little bit instead of just giving these players away.
Yeah, guys, I did want to touch on a couple things that we already talked about. Just really circle back and do a couple quick hits. Travis Shaw has been awful against lefties all year, so I would totally expect him to start almost every day against righties, but against lefties, hey, he gets the day off now. And then he can come on and face and pinch hit, some double switch, all that fun stuff.
So against the righty, who's your starting infield, Scott? Against the right-handed pitcher, if you're Counsell.
I have no idea. anymore.
Scott, this is a speculative. You're not
West
actually
Dallas.
have to fill out the lineup. This is just speculative. If you're Craig Counsell, again, this is a fake responsibility. We're not going to require you to do anything. So just say it now on the air. Who do you pencil in as your starting infield if Travis Shaw is going to be in the lineup against a right-handed pitcher? Which I think, at the very minimum, Travis Shaw has earned the right to start every freaking game against a right-handed pitcher. Am I wrong? In the last year and a half?
Absolutely. I think he terrorizes. He's got over 900 OPS against righties. So yeah, no, he's gonna start almost every day against righties.
At what position?
I don't know. I think I think
Well, Scott, you have to get
ride the hot
your
hand.
responsibility to get him in the lineup. You just said he has a 900 OPS.
Well, okay, I'm going to play him at third because he's a third baseman. And despite the fact that he didn't embarrass himself for the 3 days that he was playing second base, it doesn't necessarily mean that he's a great second baseman. So I'm going to play him at third.
So Mike Moustakas only gets a bat against left-handed pitchers. Which is fine. I know you're not. You didn't make the move to acquire him.
Is going to play a little bit of first. I have no idea. And yeah, then what are you going to do with Aguiar? Right? You can't bench him. Well, I don't know. We have too many bats. That's the answer.
You know what though? It's not an awful problem to have too many good players. I think that we should be clear about that because the Brewers have had at least my past 3 decades of pretty closely watching Brewers baseball, we've traditionally had an awful bench, and 4 of our 8 starters besides the pitcher have been pretty horrible themselves. So I'm all right with having a glut of good bat options, at this point. So I think it's great that if we can really have a solidified and strengthened bench, I think that really helps us a ton. So, yeah, it sucks for the guys that are not starting on any given night, but as far as the team goes, I think it's great to have so many options offensively.
Well, and not only that, but remember the logjam we had at first and the logjam we had in the outfield? It kind of sorts itself out. People get hurt. People forget how to play baseball. People
need a day off. We've had so many injuries this year that I don't think any of us should be too worried about having too much depth. I still remember the days where our pinch hitting, coterie included Luke Collier as the main pinch hitter off the bench. So let's just, not worry too much about having too many good bats. Chris McGruder.
And you guys made a good point earlier in the podcast when you were talking about how with the Brewers liking to get told their bullpen earlier than most teams, and often having those bench bats with that type of mentality is even more important because you can then slot them in when you do double switches in the NL, of course, all the time, and you really can get those bench guys in for possibly more than half the game, which is, a really nice option to have. And so even if you want to technically say write down our best lineup and actually include Ryan Braun and Travis Shaw on the bench, that's a pretty solid bench, no doubt.
That's a great bench. And we talked on our podcast too a few weeks ago, Craig, about Ryan Braun. And I'm firmly of the belief, and I believe that we even talked about this before the season started, or right as it was beginning. I think Ryan Braun's best place that provides the most value on this team is off the bench. And I love the fact that we could bring Braun in as a pinch hitter and save him some wear and tear. He's obviously been banged up for like the last 4 or 5 years, it seems like, when he's been a starter. And if we get him 1 or 2 at-bats a game as a pinch hitter, several days a week rather than starting him all the time, and he can play if he has to go to the field, he can play left field, right field, or first base, I think that's a great weapon to have. I think that pitchers from the opposing team's bullpen are going to be, again, far more leery of facing Ryan Braun than they were our bench options from the past, 2 or 3 decades. Let's just put it that way.
Oh, absolutely. With all that being said, I still think a player that kind of gets lost in all this, I think Braun should definitely be starting against lefties in the outfield and coming off the bench most of the time, because Eric Thames is another underrated, almost forgotten about Brewer that really needs to be playing against all right-handed pitchers too. I mean, the guy just rakes when he's healthy against right-handed pitchers in particular, and not just the Cincinnati Reds. I mean, he's a great player to have. So, all these great options, and I think the emergence of Jesus Aguilar is definitely the one that's made all, the steps possible, and of course these trades. I just wish we had anywhere near the same amount of depth in the starting rotation, or quality for that matter. And when I have to look at Wade Miley, we just don't. I'm sorry, but that's just the fact of the matter. And I think that's why Stearns ultimately, he's built a great roster on offense and an awesome bullpen, but I'll give him credit for finding Chacin as a very cheap free agent option and passing on those other ones. But we'll see going forward. Like I said, I'm going to give him a little longer leash. Hopefully he can acquire someone in August, and definitely if not, signing someone during this off season to have head for the top of our rotation to at least next trade deadline really hit that jackpot, so to speak, and cash in some of those prospects for a top rotation type starter. Because my first inclination after this trade deadline is that Stearns is clinging a little bit too hard to some of his top prospects, and that's okay for now. But I think when it is time to really go into full contention mode, hopefully sometime within the next year or two, that Stearns is willing to pull that trigger that he wasn't able to this trade deadline.
Yeah, and I'm with you. I'm with you on that, Craig. In terms of wanting to pull the trigger on the right pitcher, I just don't know if the right pitcher was available this deadline. I guess that's sort of my bottom line with this one. I just don't.
Yeah, especially. I mean, there were
Chris
rumors
Archer,
that the Mets pitchers and the Stroman were available, but when it came down to it, ultimately they weren't. And I will give him credit for not, not caving in and giving up more for players that really were not worth probably what they were being asked for. Someone like Matt Harvey or even Zach Wheeler, I think teams are trying to squeeze as much out of teams as they could, and I'm glad, got to give Stearns credit for not tipping in for those guys.
Yeah, I totally agree. I like Zach Wheeler and I like Chris Archer, but again, not at the price that the Mets or the Rays wanted for him. And we saw that today with Pittsburgh. I think that the haul for Archer at Tampa was incredibly fortunate to get that haul back from Pittsburgh, and I think it will actually hurt the Pirates long term. But it's always that fine balance to walk. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you, Scott.
No, and I guess to play off of that a little bit, I would say it's very possible that somebody that's just trying to, cut bait, cut an overpriced starter or something like that, like you said, we could definitely pick up, if they clear waivers. I know like today it was, there were some brief rumors that we were looking at Jimmy Gonzalez from the Nationals.
Right.
Could happen, I suppose.
Yep. And I actually think the Gio is going to be one of the guys that we really do target in August.
That's another thing I wanted to throw out there and want your guys' opinion of it. If, let's say there was another injury and Davies couldn't come back, would you just consider at least for the month of August, we got 5 days off, would you just consider going to a 4-man? I mean, when you think about it, none of our pitchers none of our starters have had their arm taxed in any way this year, so I'd consider it.
I would too, and my answer to that is definitely yes. And I think, in fact, that's probably the Brewers plans going forward here. I just think that the schedule sort of allows for it, and once you get to the postseason, you only need 3-4 starters. So I think that's probably the Brewers' plan.
Good point, Scott. It's very possible.
And I also wanted to point out that Hiram Burgos, that was a joke. He has not pitched an inning this year and is extremely injured. But, we still have Tim Dillard, so we haven't brought that up.
And, Craig, I wanted to say on this podcast that if Wade Miley ends the year with an ERA at 2.01, which it was going into play tonight, will you say that was a good signing by David Stearns?
If he ends the year at 2.01?
If he ends the year where his ERA is currently, would you then say it was a good signing? Would you give him credit for that?
Absolutely.
Like Shasim? Okay.
Apparently, I would give him kudos for and asking where he found the turd polish, because it works.
Hey, it's getting results. Less games because of injuries, but a lower ERA than anybody that we could have acquired today, just for the record.
Wade Miley so far has 13 walks to 12 Ks.
Perfect.
In
Well,
22
mirrors.
and a third innings. Yes, he has been an escape artist.
So as long as they don't come around to score, okay, cool.
Yeah, that must be like our pitching philosophy. Like, just don't give them anything good to hit, and they'll swing at it. And if they don't, walk them and face the next guy.
Even Peralta last night, we're taping this on the night of the trade deadline. Peralta last night escaped from some major jams last evening. But we should also point out quick while we're on that the Brewers did win their first game in Los Angeles last night. So we are 1-0 on the series against the Dodgers as of this taping.
So far, so good. Oh, hey, can I just quick do like the national wrap of the On the Pulse first glance hot take, whatever buzzword.
Yeah, do that.
Yeah,
of what everybody thought about the Brewers. I've compiled a lot of
whatever you want.
And then Tinkerbell also kind of did most of this. So if any of this is wrong, we can just blame and fire her. in that order. But very quickly, MLB said we were not a winner, but we were an honorable mention. So that was very nice of them. CBS said that we were not a winner, but our infield defense has gotten better with the Moustakas and Schoop trades.
Okay.
Maybe. Yahoo flat out said that we were losers. USA Today said that they thought that we were spinning our wheels by not getting a starter. The Ringer said that we were winners. SB Nation said that we were losers, and the Sporting News said that we were winners. I'm sure there are other publications out there, but Tinkerbell,
Scott,
one in turn.
Scott, what do the standings say?
The standings say that hopefully by the end of tonight we're tied for first, tied for the best record in the National League. But I guess as of this taping, just a game out and leading the wild card.
There you go.
But none of that necessarily, I mean, it doesn't say much about, we don't know who's going to, if these trades are, quote, wins or losses until the end of the year. And even then, just because, like, let's say we don't make the playoffs, it doesn't necessarily mean that these trades were bad. It just means it didn't work out. Conversely, if we do make the playoffs and win the World Series, you could also say that we yoasted our way through it and it didn't have to do with the trade either. So you just never know.
It's great analysis, Scott.
Awesome. No, I hate to cut this short, guys, but I'm just realizing now, kind of like how Stearns realized the trade deadline was ending in 20 minutes before he made that last trade, not first starting pitcher. I'm realizing that the Taco Bell is going to close here within 20 minutes.
Yeah, that's right.
Vehicle. So I don't want to be left without the nacho fries, kind of like a starting pitcher.
Greg, we love you. You really need to talk to your doctor about how healthy it is to eat Taco Bell all the time, though, just as a friendly reminder.
Craig,
I did. He called it toxic bell. I don't know what that meant, but
it's grade E meat is not necessarily recommended by the FDA.
Craig, I got to say, for the most bang for your buck at Taco Bell right now, it's that Fritos burrito. It's only $1. It's very filling. It's not bad.
Awesome.
Thanks, Scott.
So there's your recommendation. I know you're more of a chicken quesadilla guy, but that's fine. Oh, do you want to do your should we do our fan email today?
Yeah. Go
one of them? I mean, one of our many. Should I just pick one out of the bag?
Yeah, just do one. It's great. I don't
know if there's enough time, but if you guys want to answer it.
Well, we'll do it really quick.
Quick.
It's pretty good.
Yeah.
All right, this is from Brian, who goes by Live Free or Die. And he is asking, what are your thoughts on teams trading with a division rival? I'd love to hear you guys' take on it.
I don't think it's a huge problem. Teams change over the course of a given year. So obviously if you're trading guys at the deadline, you're generally not in contention. So I think that depending on who you're trading, I wouldn't trade in the division if it was, one of Corbin Burns, for instance. I would not be trading him to the Cardinals anytime soon. But if it's just a spare piece that brings something back, I could see us doing that. I remember the Brewers did trade John Axford at one point to the Cardinals, and I was not very enthused about that deal.
Yeah, I mean, I kind of echo Vince. Baseball is unlike some of the other sports where trading within the division that you're in, football, basketball especially, is probably not, tolerated very often. But in baseball, you're talking about deep rosters, deep minor league systems. Unless you're trading your franchise player over to your division rival, or your future franchise player by accident or something like that. I don't think it's a huge deal, and I don't think I think it happens quite often, more than people would think.
Yeah, I'm going to echo your sentiments. I was going to mention, I guess, the when we traded Jason Rogers to Pittsburgh for Keon Broxton, and Broxton looked like for a second there, it looked like Broxton was going to haunt the Pirates for a few years there. It hasn't quite worked out the way I had hoped it would, but no, exactly. As long as you're not trading like a guy you're going to have to play against for the next 7 years, who's, going to instantly turn into a Brewer killer or something like that, it's totally fine. But as a GM, you can't trade like a marquee name or or also like a big prospect to a rival. But if you're just looking at like a chip here or there, or just like a little, just small players just to fill out your roster, then that's totally fine.
Like when we traded Ben Grieve to the Cubs in 03 or 04, I mean.
Exactly like that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly like that. And I know that Stearns must not agree with us because from our inside source, TC also said that whenever the Cardinals GM calls Stearns, he does answer, but
Tom Carter,
he immediately hangs up, I guess. So instead of just blocking the call.
Yeah, the Cardinals they don't have anybody good to trade anymore anyway, so whatever.
He said something about that they have no scruples or something. I don't know what that means, but apparently he doesn't like fielding those calls.
Yeah, he's right. That's good.
I got a weird question. Have either of you guys ever used a rotary phone?
Yes.
Okay, I definitely.
Are you talking about one with a dial? Is that what a rotary phone?
Like on the circle, you use the circle.
Yeah. It takes 10 minutes to dial one number. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so I would like to have one of those, just so that, like, it's such a great click noise on the other end when you hang it up, like, really hard, just slam the phone down like that. And I don't think, like, if you had any kind of, like, a smartphone or anything, you're just not going to be able to have the satisfaction of doing that. So, like, if somebody just had, like, a ridiculous offer, you could just yell, like, that's and just smash that phone down. I think that would be really important. So I think as a GM, you'd have to have that phone, not for day-to-day business, but you just have to be like, oh, hang on, let me get on my other phone. Like, just for that.
It's a great point, Scott. If you're ever a Major League Baseball general manager, I'll be happy to give you a rotary phone.
Oh, sweet.
And I could be mistaken, but I believe most bullpen phones are still the rotary variety. I'm not sure, but
that's an interesting question. That's very interesting. In the New York Stadium, I don't know if that's still true. I have a confession. My parents actually own a rotary phone. It's mostly for decoration, but it does actually work.
Awesome.
They have it in there.
Awesome.
We had one as well, actually. So, yeah.
Yeah. Kind of cool.
And for all you younger viewers out there, sometimes it's also referred to as you're on your rotary phone. You use it on the landline. You may not know what that is, but it's not a cell phone. So
it exists. Yeah, you can't take it with you. Don't try to unplug it.
So, all right,
guys.
Stay classy, guys, and.
Quick reminder to our fans, continue on with the questions. We'll try to get to as many as we can next episode. Coming at you next week, twice per usual. Brew Crew Review Podcasts with an S at gmail.com. Otherwise, Scotty, what's our Twitter feed?
Twitter, get on there. We're at Brew Crew Review, and then the number 1. At Brew Crew Review 1.
There you go.
And our Twitter followers have gone up, I think, 200% in the last month. So let's keep that
Actually,
up.
Yeah, we've gotten quite a few. We're plugging away on Twitter. Our social media interns are not going to be fired this week. They've done a good job, and we'll keep Maria on one more week. So
I think we went from 70 followers to 140 or something. Yep.
We've been live tweeting most of the games now on Twitter. Vince has been doing a phenomenal job with that. We try to put up polls every couple days just to see what you guys think about stuff or just random weird questions. So feel free to absolutely follow us on Twitter. You can also subscribe to our YouTube channel. You can tell that it's a YouTube channel because if you go to YouTube, it actually, and look up Brew Crew, it says YouTube channel right on it. So there's no way to be able to misconstrue that. So, no, definitely, subscribe there too. Why not?
That's great.
All right.
Scott. Thanks, guys. All right. Until next time, stay classy, Wisconsin. Go Brewers.
Go Brewers.
Go Brewers.
Go Brewers.